While most presidents wore suit jackets, ties, and dress pants all the time, you don't have to any longer. Because Presidents Unplugged has merch. If you want to check out some new shirts to buy as a nice gift for somebody in your family or just something that you want yourself, go to presidentsunpluggedmerch.com to check out new shirts, hoodies, crew necks, and anything else that you can dream of. Now in many more colors and new designs coming soon. I'm very excited for the Presidents Unplugged merch store to finally be open. Now, let's get back to the show. How can a man that doesn't come from money, didn't go to college, lied to get into the military, end up being one of the most important 20th century presidents? I'm your host, Svenson. Let's begin. Born on May 8th, 1884, Harry Truman was a pretty interesting kid. He grew up on a farm in Independence, Missouri, and his life was pretty simple at the beginning. He loved history, especially the presidents. He played piano when he was about 10 years old, and he actually wanted to be a professional piano player at one point in his life. His name, Harry Truman, a lot of people know him as Harry S. Truman. What does the S stand for? Well, both of his grandfather's name both started with S, so instead of having a real middle name, it's just S to represent both of them. So there's your little fun fact of the day, that the S in Harry S. Truman doesn't really stand for anything. It's just a representation of both of his grandfathers. One of the most iconic things that people think of with Harry Truman are those little round glasses that he wore. He wore them all the way from when he was a child to when he was president to when he died in 1972. These glasses weren't just your average, I have 20/40 vision, I can't see anything vision. Harry Truman basically had a disability with how awful his sight was. His glasses were basically 1 inch thick. And I will probably mention later, when I went to the Harry Truman Presidential Library in Independence, Missouri, they had a little thing in front where you could look through to kind of have Harry Truman's vision. Y'all, it was terrible. I couldn't see my hand 2 feet in front of me. And it was honestly to the point of a disability. And it was awful. So, Harry Truman, as a person and as a president, can really show off a good piece of the American dream. The fact that even if you have a disability, even if you have a setback in your life, you can fight through it and still do great things, no matter your circumstances. And even with this extremely difficult situation that he had with his vision, he still went on to become a World War I general after being drafted in France. He fought in World War I and really showed off some of his leadership prowess that he would use during his presidential terms. Harry Truman came home after World War I and proposed to his high school sweetheart, Bess Wallace. But guess what Bess Wallace said? Nah. Bess rejected him the first time he proposed. But then, very shortly later, he came back, and she was very honest with him and said, hey, I didn't mean it. So they got married. Oh, how romantic. After marrying his lovely wife, Bess Wallace, now Bess Truman, Harry Truman started a couple of little businesses to try to get his feet on the ground. He started a failed men's clothing brand, which did not work very well. But then, after being not a very successful businessman, but just a great person in general, he had a great personality, he really spoke the truth, a man named Tom Pendergast came up to him and said, you should be a politician. Tom Pendergast was a man who was a political machine, basically meaning he looked around to find good politicians and basically told them, this is how you should believe, and sent them out. It was very wrong, and the sad thing is it definitely still happens today. Maybe not here, but around the world. So after Tom Pendergast kind of pushed Truman along, he was like, okay, I can do this. So Tom Pendergast and his cronies gave Truman a lot of support in the state of Missouri, where he was born. After a bit of time, Harry Truman became a senator of Missouri, and Truman was very active as a senator, and he did a lot more than the average senator did. The main thing that he did that really gave him fame was he went up to Franklin Roosevelt, the president at the time, and said, "Hey, we're about to go into another world war, and I want to make sure that we don't waste any money." So Harry Truman basically set aside a whole nother thing to do and started an organization to watch money and make sure that we're spending what we need to and nothing more on war efforts. He ended up saving billions of dollars for the country. This gave him a lot of national respect. So, after this extremely awesome move to save billions of dollars for the country, the Democratic Convention came up. Franklin Roosevelt had 3 vice presidents in his 4 terms. And after winning a 3rd term, which at the time was crazy because nobody had done that yet, he was running for a 4th term. But for some reason, he just said, man, Henry Wallace is not going to be a good vice president option this time. Henry Wallace at the time was really pushing. He was his vice president for, I believe, his 2nd and 3rd term. And his ideas were starting to push a little too left-wing for FDR, so he decided to repick. So in 1944, at the Democratic Convention, who did he pick? Harry Truman. Even though FDR was a strong person, he was really declining health-wise. He was not doing very well. He had polio, and this is a big thing for the FDR episode, but Franklin Roosevelt couldn't really walk. I mean, he was in a wheelchair a lot, but the country was really good at hiding it. So, Harry Truman became his VP, and we're starting a great 4th term for FDR. And then 82 days into the term as vice president, tragedy struck. On April 12th, 1945, Franklin Roosevelt died. So what does that mean? Harry Truman became the president. Whoa. That was very lucky from Harry Truman to go from a senator basically immediately to vice presidential position. And now, in 82 days, he became president. 82 days as vice president. That's all he got. And then, what happens right after he becomes president? A big deal. When Harry Truman was the vice president, he didn't even know about the Manhattan Project. And if you've watched Oppenheimer or know just a little bit about history, the Manhattan Project was basically Einstein and a bunch of people saying, hey, there's this technology called nuclear weapons, atomic bombs, the atom bomb, as they called it, and we need to get our hands on the technology before anyone in the world gets this technology, because in the wrong hands, it could destroy the world as we know it. So, becoming president, they said, oh, hey, Harry, how you doing? We have this thing called a bomb that can kill hundreds of thousands of people. Just wanted to make sure you knew about it. So he said, okay. And then, on May 8th, 1945, it was victory. The war's over in Europe. 1945, May 8th, 1945 was known as VE Day, or Victory in Europe. It's when the war, World War II, slowed down and wasn't a big deal. And it was over in Europe. But there was still a lot of war in the Pacific. Japan was not giving up. Japan and the United States were going back and forth, Iwo Jima, all this stuff. So we had to do something. Harry Truman made one of the most important decisions, and honestly, one of the most debated decisions in history. While George Washington himself might not have had an Instagram page, Presidents Unplugged does. If you want to see some presidential content and overall updates on the show, come to the Instagram at Presidents_Unplugged. See you there. On August 6th, 1945, Harry Truman told the United States military to drop an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. This bomb killed tens of thousands of individuals. And a bomb falling on a town made entirely of wood is devastating. The United States said, hey, we've killed tens of thousands of your people. You can surrender now or face the consequences. So 3 days later, on August 9th, 1945, Japan wasn't giving up, and we weren't either. We dropped the Fat Man bomb on Nagasaki, Japan, killing over 100,000 in the process. In 2023, I had the privilege to go to the Harry Truman Presidential Library, and one of the most insane things I saw in that library was the pin that was pulled out of the Fat Man to release the bomb. That pin, that simple 3-inch long piece of metal, resulted in killing hundreds of thousands of individuals. This decision was one that ended up having the United States a little bit torn up on what to think. This bomb was dropped not to kill hundreds of thousands of Japanese lives, but to save hundreds of thousands of American lives in the years approaching. Seeing something like that in person, seeing the notes that Harry Truman had to write to the United States government and people who were affiliated with the bomb to say, yeah, we're going to drop it. That decision is what really has sealed Harry Truman's place as one of the most consequential presidents in the 20th century. And that decision would make or break his reputation for the rest of his life. And after we dropped the second bomb on August 9th, Hirohito, the emperor of Japan at the time, said, okay, we surrender. The war was over. No more nukes, right? No, sadly not. After World War II, something became very apparent. We can't let this get out of control, because nuclear weapons can end the world as we know it. So, with people stocking up on nuclear weapons to try to be better than their neighbor, that started what we know as the Cold War. The Cold War was not really a war, but the Cold War was a time where people were in constant fear. There was so much nuclear weaponry around the world. In 1 second, the world could fade into destruction, and the world as we know it could be over. A time of fear that would go all the way until Ronald Reagan's terms, almost 40 years later. The Cold War was scary, and it began right after we showed our dominance in 1945 with the 2 atomic bombs on Japan. One more big deal in the Harry Truman business as we close. In 1948, Truman was coming in for re-election. He was the incumbent. He had basically 3 or 4 years in office, and he was going against Thomas Dewey. Thomas Dewey was a powerhouse in the Republican Party who did a lot and was very popular. So people expected for Thomas Dewey to absolutely wipe Harry Truman in this election. But here's the funny thing. Harry Truman wasn't just going to give up. So the night of the election, newspapers were like, okay, Dewey defeats Truman. They put that on newspapers. They had them printed. Thomas Dewey became the 34th president of the United States. Except Truman wasn't going to let that happen. Harry Truman gets on a train and goes around the country for the next couple days, campaigning all around the country by train. He was determined, this man. Gave some of the most influential, most powerful speeches in that time. And out of that, he won the election. There's a great picture online, you can look it up, of Harry Truman holding a magazine that says Dewey defeats Truman. It's iconic because it shows how America can perceive things before they really happen. And it shows how, with dedication and with drive, you can do anything you want. And he went back home to Independence, Missouri, and he made a great quote to show who the president really is. Being the president is a public service, not a business. Harry Truman was a humble man who wanted the best for the country as we know it. Even though Harry Truman might have been in some unexpected situations, he made some unforgettable decisions. Decisions that would shape our country as we know it. And it's important to know that sometimes decisions in history are hard to make because some people aren't going to like them. But in the end, I believe that Harry Truman did save hundreds of thousands of American lives by dropping the 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So, even though Harry Truman made some extremely difficult decisions that would skew his popularity during his terms, Harry Truman today is known as one of the most important presidents in the 20th century. And it shows that his toughness through situations as hard as deciding to drop bombs that would kill hundreds of thousands of people, those strong decisions can really shape and save lives in the end. And Harry Truman fought with all he had for the greater good of our country, and we can always thank him for that. Tune in next Friday as we look into fireworks, freedom, and Founding Fathers, a July 4th special. Next week just so happens to be July 4th, and oh my gosh, it's on Friday. So Friday at 1, you will have a very special episode waiting for you to show you what makes that specific date, July 4th, so special. I'm Ty Svenson, this is Presidents Unplugged, and I'll see you next week. God bless. We need to make an executive decision now. The executive decision to follow Presidents Unplugged on Apple Podcasts or Spotify today to be notified weekly that your favorite presidential podcast has released new content. Now, let's get back to the show.